From lunch, hopefully you got full. I thought the food was pretty good, so thank you, AES. Hopefully everyone stopped by the Arbor booth and got a mint, and your breath is smelling nice and fresh. We're going to kick the afternoon off with a panel. We got a couple talks, and then we'll take a break. Our first panel is XR-enabled remote support and augmented work instructions, and it's going to be moderated by the CEO and co-founder of Kit AR, Manuel Oliveira.
Thank you. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the panel on XR-enabled remote and augmented work instructions. Now, this panel, we have our distinguished speakers that I'll let them introduce themselves in a little bit. And what we have is we're going to structure this around 3 themes where they will share their experiences, and hopefully you'll take something home that you can apply into your own contexts. So, without further ado, because it's more about them, I'll start with Melissa. Could you do a small introduction and the experience you're bringing to the table to talk about?
Sure. Hello, everyone. So my name is Melissa Dembski. I'm with Veolia, which for those of you who might not have heard of us, we operate water, wastewater treatment plants, bring energy solutions and waste solutions. So really environmental solution company, coming with the use case from my background when I was in Muni Water, but today I lead technical and performance, our strategy and implementation. So the use case is really around connecting our 200 plus operation sites, water, wastewater treatment plants, with our technicians, our technical engineers, our water quality asset management experts, who are also distributed across the country. So lots of sites, lots of geography, and lots of people.
Hi, everybody. Jeff Shine from Regeneron Pharmaceuticals in New York. I'm a staff IT technology analyst. Basically, my group is in charge of innovation and emerging technologies, such as like biometrics, smart factory, and why we're all here today, XR. Specifically around XR, we have a really good use case for remote assist. Our manufacturing personnel are all gowned up and in our process area, and they need to be able to call outside of the area using remote assist, so that's what I'll be talking about today. Thank you.
Cody.
Good afternoon, everyone. Cody Myrtle, Vice President of Capture Management for Momentum. Most of you probably haven't heard of Momentum. We're actually pretty new in our industry in terms of the name as well, but we're a large defense contractor, global, in over 80 countries, 54,000 employees. We're one of the biggest services providers to the Department of Defense, partner nations, and then also we have a commercial portfolio as well. My primary job as a former Apache pilot is to go after, capture, and win the large government contracts within the aviation sector specifically. But for the last 6 years, I've also worn a second hat of kind of the technology side, specifically with implementing a remote assist, remote expert type use case across our portfolio of contracts. And, you know, it's a very broadly applicable, high value type of integration, and so we've been able to do that in over 20 programs within Momentum today. So looking forward to speaking today.
Zach Peters from Komatsu in Longview, Texas, where we build the world's largest front-end loader, the kind that you see on the Discovery Channel, right? And when you build something that large, you often have challenges not only manufacturing it, but as far as supporting it in the field. My job is to program and plan all of the training and career development for our manufacturing employees, and as well as our support employees and our customers out in the field. That's what I do from 7:30 to 8 o'clock in the morning before my boss gets there, and then he comes running down the hallway waving his arms wildly. And I get drug off into areas such as this, where I'm investigating the use and trying to make his wildest dreams come true and make the technology work. So.
Hi, everybody. I'm Ryan Johnston. I'm a principal engineer with Delta Airlines in the Technology Development Engineering Group within TechOps, our maintenance organization. Before that, I actually started my career out here in Texas at NASA. I was a flight controller for the International Space Station before moving on to work at Rice University as a technology translation manager, working to translate medical devices from the kind of research environment to a commercial availability stage. Now, in my current role at Delta Airlines, I work on augmenting our workforce of over 8,000 aircraft maintenance technicians, or AMTs to help Delta operate a safer and more on-time airline, together with all of the other organizations at Delta that are working to do that same thing. We have Kevin Markham here from ACS, who's been a tremendous mentor to me, so thank you to Kevin. But within that, our aircraft maintenance technicians have a tremendously complex and dynamic job to do. So it's our role to make sure they're outfitted with the appropriate kind of technology modalities to help them given their operating environment. So we're looking at things like, multimodal technology solutions, including classroom-based trainings and more fully immersive augmented or virtual reality, tied with potentially sister augmented reality applications for like engine maintenance and component maintenance shops. Together with, we've implemented RealWear Navigator headsets for work out in the field to give AMTs thermal troubleshooting and remote assistance capabilities, even in harsh weather or when they're on the road and don't have access to other technology infrastructure.
Hello, I'm Randy Burnsworth, Porsche Cars North America. I'm the manager of technical training. So we are using HoloLens to produce guides, and we are using that with our technicians in the field. We have 200 dealers in the United States, a couple thousand technicians. So we're trying to help them understand the complexities of the vehicle so they can repair it properly the first time. And our use case has started with really helping them locate things in the vehicle like control units, disconnecting the harnesses, ground points and so forth, splice points and what have you, because those things are different from one car to another. When somebody comes to work on our cars, they should already be a good tech, but we need to get them on board with the specifics of our brand. So those types of things aren't apparent when you're looking at wiring diagrams, for example. So by bringing it to life in a three-dimensional format, it really helps them get it right the first time.
Okay, thank you everyone. As you saw, we have a wide range of experience from the industry using XR technologies and rolling it out. So I will start with the first theme, which is COVID was actually an optimal catalyst to get people to look at XR more seriously and apply it in industry, right? And around on the panel, they all were given a mission. Get it working. We can't get anywhere, but we still need to conduct business as usual. Now, thankfully, COVID is no longer around, and or at least you don't have the lockdowns that prevent you from doing business as usual. So the question I have for two of the panel members is, how have things changed regarding the use of XR technologies? Are people still using it now that it's not mandatory and they have no other solution? So, Melissa, you want to take a first jab?
Sure, thank you. So for our use case, as I mentioned, it's really connecting technical experts with water and wastewater treatment plant operators, mechanics. So COVID really was the spurt for us. We had kind of talked about generally how, what could we do with some kind of technology to connect virtually, but we didn't really explore it. We didn't get to it until COVID hit, and we weren't able to be on site. And we had, we were trying FaceTime, and we were trying some of the basics, just connectivity. We found that there were sites, we were trying to do some predictive monitoring and needed to get some data and couldn't get our technicians to those sites. So we started exploring and piloting some augmented reality solutions, and really found that the small sites, the small volume of sites that we had, really adopted it. It worked really well. They were excited to have the support. They had a bit of time to help connect. Went really well, but we didn't get to that kind of full stage adoption when the COVID restrictions were limited. So the masks came off and people went, wow, I'm back to normal. Okay, so our technical team experts said, I'm just gonna start flying back to the sites. And so, we really struggled with that adoption. From the technical team perspective, I think it was what they were used to. It was, well, I don't know what else I'm gonna find on site, so I'll go and I'll do all these things at the same time. And then as well, we've had a lot of promotions, changes in division, leaving the company. And so even those experts that had adopted it, as they leave, they take that with them, which is great for where they're going. And it's helping to spread in some of the other parts of the organization, but is also leaving a vacuum as we have new individuals coming in. From the site perspective, we had the biggest challenge is really around connectivity. The treatment plants are often in places where we're outside of cities. There may be low cell service. Wi-Fi is restricted to admin offices. When you look at the even the locations that are trying to connect, it's in concrete bunkers where the pipes are, the mechanical equipment, and so that connectivity sometimes isn't there. What we're finding that we're setting up is a list of sites where we're kind of connectivity proven. So, I heard mentioned earlier the attention span is very short for the operations and mechanic staff. That's very much true here at the treatment plants. So if it doesn't work right away the first time, they're not going to pick it up again. Like, that didn't work, I'm not going to go back. So really trying to make that connectivity piece tested first, might be by a technician who is on site, and then to say, okay, now this is in that approved list, let's work with that site. So we not only have adoption by the technical team members, but the site staff that we're trying to balance. So we are making the ROI case. You can look at it obviously from a financial perspective. You're saving money on flights. From an environmental compliance, that you're getting, that treatment train may be fixed or repaired more quickly. You can look at it even from our CO2 emissions. But what's really connecting with team members that we're finding is being able to talk about work-life balance. So to that technician who doesn't have to get on a plane, they can spend that time at their child's ball game, or whatever else that is that helps to them to stay at their house more often, so they're not on the road all the time. And then from the site staff, it's overtime, right? Because they're battling that equipment that still isn't working right. And if we can get that more quickly, again, that work-life balance, that seems to resonate more than saying, hey, we're going to save money or a carbon footprint. But it's like, this is what it really means to you. So we're still on the way. We're still working on full adoption, but that's where we are.
Thank you, Melissa. The good thing is it's become a tool that's in the toolbox. It's no longer something that's on the shelf that nobody knows how it works. So it has become an option. Then it's an issue of adoption of people reaching out for it first. Exactly. But it is there. Okay, Jeff, how's your experience?
Very, very similar to Melissa. She stole a lot of my thoughts here, but I'll try again. March 13th, 2020, everybody know what happened, right? The government said, you got to go home. You can't work. At Regeneron, we make life-saving medicines for people, so we can't go home. At Starbucks, you can go to Starbucks, and if it's closed, you go to another Starbucks. At Regeneron, you have to work. So now we have to figure out, how do you work in these new CDC guidelines during COVID, right? Less people in our process areas. In order to get into the process area, you have to get gowned up. It takes a lot of time and a lot of money to go in. So now you've got a bunch of people in there that need to communicate with the outside world. So I had a couple of technology solutions I was working on before COVID. And like Manuel said, it was just the catalyst. Jeff, get this to work right now. We need to figure it out. So we enabled some headsets. And one of the requirements that we had in a clean room environment was we needed to have headsets that were sterile and met all of the clean room strict guidelines, right? So we chose RealWear to do that. And so now we've got operators inside of our process area that typically would have to find a phone, or maybe more people can be in there, but now that we don't have a lot of people in there, they can simply put on a headset and in real time make a phone call to the outside world to help them troubleshoot, figure out a problem, or even just ask a simple question that they would normally be able to turn to their coworker and ask. It was game changing, right? So the adoption because of COVID was phenomenal. Fast forward, COVID's over, we learned a lot, but guess what? People at Regeneron, they're still using those headsets because it saves money, it saves time, it saves carbon footprints. Why would you want to have people in the area if they didn't have to? So now they've got the tools that they need to communicate outside of the area. So, I mean, short answer is COVID was a catalyst, but we're still figuring out how to innovate and use these tools, and people are still grabbing them.
Thank you, Jeff. But from what I understand, you actually have strong management support, and you're actually rolling out the program further, right?
Yeah, we are. We're scaling it up now. You know, we went from a couple of headsets, 20 headsets, and a couple of users to hundreds of users and 100 headsets. Looking at more use cases. What else can we do with these headsets besides remote assist. I also do digital work instructions. I know this panel's not about that, but we're still using those digital work instructions as well on the headset in real time, hands-free. So rather than read a piece of paper with some words on it, you can now consume rich media with video and audio and a choose-your-own-adventure type of work to do certain tasks. Very interactive, so it's the first time right most of the time.
Yeah, thank you, Jeff. So, thank you, because you actually gave the introduction to the next thing that we're going to talk about, which is stepwise instructions. Now, probably most of in the audience deal with that, and one of the major barriers you have is the cost of creating those instruction sets. Because they're rich, you usually want to use high fidelity models and so forth. So for this team, I would like to ask our distinguished panel members from Delta and also from Porsche, how do they deal with the cost of creating content? So who wants to go first? Randy? Go ahead.
Okay, so we have a vendor that we use to help us do the heavy lifting, and that does alleviate a lot of demand on my staff. And of course, there is cost associated with that. But part of what we're trying to do is to help them understand how to use our information systems, how to understand our technology, so that they can then do it faster the next time and the next time. So in other words, we're really working to build a long-term relationship with them. And in doing that, they get better. And from the first content they built to now, I mean, we've seen that actually happen. So it has bore fruit for us. We still need our in-house subject matter experts because there's nobody who really knows the cars as well as we do. So they still have to vet the material, and it does take a little bit of effort on our part and time, which is a little difficult to get sometimes, but we still manage to make that work. But really what we found to be the most fruitful thing, since we're dealing with something that's so complex, is that we really have to find a vendor that we can work with long-term, somebody who's committed to it. So for example, one of the individuals who's doing this, he has a classic 911, and it's in his best interest to stay in touch with us.
Yeah. Thank you, Randy. Ryan, could you share some of the lessons that you've learned to optimize and mitigate the costs in the development of the same content?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Manuel. When I think about optimizing or reducing these content creation costs at Delta, I think about largely optimizing the combination of both the use case, the specific use case you're going after, and the right hardware and software solution for that given use case. So if I think about an example in our engine maintenance space, which is experiencing a lot of pressure to overhaul more engines than ever before with a younger workforce than we've had historically. In that context, it would be tremendous to have highly immersive, high fidelity models that we could show and track and produce augmented reality work instructions for the AMTs working on those engines. However, the kind of scanning or procurement of those 3D models, which we have a panel have talked about largely, a lot of the operators have issues accessing those 3D models. It can be cost prohibitive or otherwise resource prohibitive to go out and get those files to work with. But if you get specific about a use case and a technology, you can be creative and kind of get around some of those issues. So for example, if we narrowed our kind of task to installing brackets in the correct location and orientation on an engine on the production line, and we could pair that with projected augmented reality work instructions, then you can kind of simplify the problem down to just projecting a 2D outline of where each bracket needs to go to the operator and kind of stepping them through the process that way. Not that that's the only way to do it, but that's a way to kind of minimize the content creation costs associated with that specific task. Likewise, in the out in the field example, we've implemented RealWear Navigator headsets at many of our domestic line maintenance locations and are continuing to roll those out further. And that provides a kind of no task-specific content creation needed platform to provide mechanics with remote assistance. So for example, if a relatively inexperienced aircraft maintenance technician in Salt Lake City is tasked with rigging a Boeing 757 L1 entry door. That's a very complex and can be physically demanding task that AMT may have never performed before and may not be comfortable performing independently on their own the first time. But with the RealWare implementation, they're able to basically get on a support call with remote expertise based out of Atlanta, show them what they're looking at, and show them working through the task and get advice from that remote expertise directly in their ear during the task with the use of both of their hands in an unobscured vision. Whereas previously, that would have required that expertise from Atlanta to physically travel to Salt Lake City to fix that aircraft and get it back in service. So by using that platform, it gets around the content creation costs while also providing that relatively inexperienced AMT the ability to kind of upskill themselves and facilitate knowledge transfer and learning while also getting the aircraft back in service sooner.
Okay, thank you, Ryan. So if I understood correctly, one way of mitigating the cost of content development is to balance how much content the workers really need to do their work, and then make the user experience in such a way so they access the content they need to do their work. So it's not necessary for training. Right. Okay. So thank you for that, Randy and Ryan. So let's go for the next topic. Generative AI, big buzzword. A lot of people are trying to figure out how to use AI to their own benefit. So I ask both Cody and Zach, what experiments have they done in AI, and how does that affect the way forward in the use of XR in their organizations? Who wants to go first?
Yeah, I can start. So, as I mentioned at Amentum, we're a large defense contractor made up of dozens and dozens of disparate contracts with DoD, foreign partners, even commercial side as well. And so each one of those contracts can vary greatly in scope. For that reason, we've kind of targeted the remote expert use case because it's broadly applicable to pretty much any of those programs, any program that has a frontline worker that needs to reach back for remote assistance. So now enter generative AI, right? So our goal with Remote Expert was always to immediately get the expertise to the point of need and do so, with that immediate factor. That's not always, as we've seen, possible because we don't have a call center of experts of every single flavor at Amentum just sitting there waiting to be called, right? So sometimes that immediate factor isn't always possible, but what we're experimenting with today is introducing generative AI as a way to provide that expertise without the human component on the other end. So in our experiment so far, we've seen that probably the biggest issue or refining that we've done with using generative AI is based on the type of work that we're doing. Because we do everything from fixing an AC unit for a facilities maintenance type of contract to maintaining a fighter jet or an Apache helicopter, or nuclear decommissioning, or we also do the environmental cleanup mission, or highly technical engineering. And it seems to be that the more technical nature the work is, the more difficult it is to rely on the accuracy of the generative AI response. And so it may be valuable. It initially seems like it would be very valuable to just get an immediate answer of what you need. But when we find that the accuracy isn't as high with the answers as what we need, then it just increases the quality control workload. Because now we have to have someone vetting and saying, well, was that response that worker got correct? Should they proceed with taking that recommended action? Because sometimes the wrong expertise can be even more harmful than no expertise at all, right? So accuracy is a major concern, but what that's done is really helped us refine it down to what use cases do make sense at this point, where the technology is, focusing on those areas, focusing on those programs, and just the same as we did for Remote Expert. It wasn't right for every program from day one. In fact, I was doing this for 2.5, almost 3 years. I was keeping up with the technology before we even implemented it on programs, because from my point of view, it wasn't quite ready. The hardware wasn't quite there. The software wasn't user-friendly enough, but once it reached that point, I was staged, I was ready, we immediately expanded, right? So we're looking to do the same thing in generative AI today.
It's interesting. You're bringing up an important point, which is an issue of trust. And do people really trust AI? For example, they've done studies in medical science where this is actually an interesting study that I would recommend looking up, where they did three groups. One was doing medical diagnosis with AI, just AI. Then another one which was just the doctors, and one that was mixed. And they asked the patients which had the best bed manners and which was the most accurate. You're never going to believe, okay, the top was the AI. Patients actually preferred the AI. But the group that I thought would be, if not the first, the second, which was the mix, actually was the worst. Because the doctors didn't trust the AI. So they would always second guess the AI and then do what is wrong. So what you're saying is exactly true. Sometimes having no recommendation, but the bad recommendation is worse than having no recommendation. Anyways, thanks. Zach?
Yeah, so if anybody's ever done training, you know one of the biggest challenges is to make information sticky, right? So that it's impactful and it stays with the user when they need it, right? They can go through a training course, but they may not see the piece of equipment for 6 months, a year, right? Especially if it's working, you don't want them to see it, right? So one of the challenges to that is they go to the service manual when they do have the opportunity to interact with the equipment. The problem is our technical publication writers are prolific, right? They put everything in the manual, and I mean everything, right? So it takes 30 minutes just to search for a simple value that you need, a hydraulic pressure, a component weight, something of that nature. So back in 2019, we set off down this course where we decided we would develop an Alexa app, right? And the intent was that the technician should be able to say, hey, Alexa, or hey, Cletus, or whatever we called the project, what's the value of this? And it would spit back an answer. The problem in writing the Alexa apps are that you have to define all of those prompts, all of those intents up front and deliberately, right? That's a huge mountain to climb, and we just found it impossible to actually support. Fast forward to last year, here comes a natural language interpreter that can take the language that you speak and actually research all that documentation and put back the information to you. So earlier this year, in conjunction with Ernst & Young and Microsoft, we set on a program where we developed a technician chatbot. And going back to your trust issue, what we did is we had them not only return the answer that the technician would ask for, but also there's a visual card in there that includes the page from the service manual that reference material comes from, right? So it's not just that the chatbot is making up an answer, it's actually pulling that from somewhere in the documentation and then providing proof of work when it comes back to it. And that's great. That's a great first step to take. We've rolled that out. Our technicians are loving it. But what's the next step? So what that helped to do was uncover the gaps. Like I said, they're prolific, and they thought they had everything in there. What we quickly identified in going through the testing and vetting process for AI was stuff that we assumed was in the service manual wasn't in there at all. It was in our training documentation. It was in our service information letters. It was in other documentation throughout the organization that we just assumed had made it into those service manuals. They never did. So it helped us then to identify how to go back, and now tech pubs are rewriting, reevaluating that content, making that more comprehensive and more available, right? But now we added that to the repository, and it is conveniently all available for the technician just for asking, in their own natural broken English, right? Or redneck or whatever we're speaking today, right? They ask the question and they get the answer. That's great. One of the things that I got from a conversation last night was squint. is it's still missing the mark. There's still one more piece to do, and that's contextuality. One of the things, and this is not a commercial for Squint, right? If you like them, they're great. I love the idea that they brought to me. The contextuality is the chatbot should be learning the user as well. It should be saying, hey, look, you've asked this question 27 times. Do you need training on this subject, right? This is something that you obviously struggle with, or what is it you're trying to do? And that AI should then start to figure out and help point analytics back to the training department so we can figure out where we can provide interventions to help speed the process of that technician. Because for us, it's all about that technician either manufacturing the machine on our manufacturing floor or supporting that machine in the field and getting it back into the dig phase. Because if we're not moving dirt, we're not making money.
Okay. Thank you, Zach. Okay, microphone gets back. So it's always better than trying to project the voice. Okay, thank you very much. Before we jump into Q&A, I'd like to ask each panelist one key idea that you'd like the audience to take away when they leave the panel session today. So shall we start from left to right? Melissa?
Sure. I think as you heard, we're working with thousands of site operators and mechanics. We're working with hundreds of technical experts. It's a million micro conversations. Just when you think you've shared the message, you think it's out there, there's someone new, there's new adopters, there's new team members, and or you're saying the message again for the 3rd, the 5th, the 10th time. When you think you've said it enough, multiply that times 10.
Okay. Jeff?
Excellent. All right, I got two points here. One for my fellow IT people out there. They're going to be resistant to change. They're going to be afraid of the technology. Communicate. Involve them in your mission early. Find digital champions to help you along with the ride to deploy this new technology. Communicate often and fast, and they're going to come along with the ride. To my end users out there who are scared of this new technology, trust the process, go along with the ride, and voice your opinions. It's never a one-size-fits-all solution. There could be iterations of the deployment process.
Yeah, one thing I wanted to share was, I think actually from this conference a few years back, and I was sitting out in the crowd and heard it, and at the time I just thought it sounded like wise advice, but now that I've lived it firsthand, implementing our solution on dozens of contracts, I've seen that it is absolutely true, which is the digital champion, or finding a champion within your organization who's going to be that advocate for the technology outside of you and your team, right? Now, if you're here, you're either trying to implement technology within your own company, or you're selling the technology that you make to another company, more likely. So whichever case that is, you're trying to get a new group of people to use a piece of technology which is going to make them resistant to change. So in either case, in that sub-organization, find a champion, find someone who likes the tech aspect of it, who's very interested in what you're bringing, wants to learn more, wants to take on being a train the trainer that's going to pass that on and be an advocate after you leave the scene and you're done with your proof of concept, or you're done implementing and training at a certain site. Because I've done it enough to know that that's the difference between initial success and long-term adoption. If you don't have a champion on site or in that sub-organization, you probably won't see long-term adoption.
Thank you, Cody. Zach?
Mine's a little more upstream from that, and that is know what the problem is that you're solving for. There's a lot of technology on display downstairs. There's a lot of technology out there. It's great. It's interesting. It's fun. You could probably find hundreds of applications for everything out there. But if you're not clear on what it is you're trying to solve, you'll invariably pick the wrong one, and then your project will fail, and then you'll never want to try again, right? So be deliberate about what it is you're trying to solve, and then go find the technology that solves that, and then don't be afraid to expand it beyond that.
Thanks, Zach. Ryan?
Yeah, I would encourage anybody looking to implement extended reality applications in enterprise to think less about what you or your leadership may think naturally the best applications are, and more about what the end users of the technology are telling you their needs are.
Thank you. Brandy?
Retention. This technology has the ability to drive retention to levels that you don't get through other means. So as I sell it and I have to speak and represent the value of it, retention is huge. So that's one of the great benefits of it. And before you have ROI numbers to show anybody and you have to get somebody to dedicate, commit to it, the levels of retention that we can get are just off the charts compared to other forms.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. I would like now to open to a Q&A. So are there any questions that the audience might have for the panelists? No questions? Still feeling the after effects of lunch?
I'll bring a mic to you. 1 sec. I'm running. Not running. I'm walking fast.
They're stunned by our brilliance.
Name, company, question.
Richard, is this on? Is this on? Richard Smith, I'm with Marmon Food Service. This question's for Zach. Komatsu, right?
Okay.
You had a chatbot for your technicians. And did you find that some of these technicians, that's all, like, they don't want to learn it? Like, I can ask the chatbot and they'll tell me how to fix it. And just be kind of nonchalant about that? Or is there a metrics that you're looking for? Like you said, you've asked this question 5 times now. We shouldn't be answering it again.
I take the opinion we don't necessarily want them to learn it, especially if it's a discrete value, because the frequency of change, the ability for engineering to come change a design, right, and to change that information. The question about, hey, you've asked this 27 times, do you need training on that, just informs us of generally about the area and kind of gives us more of a guideline. It's not necessarily that there's a problem, right? It just indicates that there's interest in that, and so maybe we need to make that information more readily available. But no, I think if you can avoid memorizing stuff, you're better off anyway, right? Because those values can change, and then if you've memorized it, you have to unlearn it, or you're going to continue to do it wrong and crash the space shuttle. So.
But is it an issue also that, if I interpret the question in a different way, is it the concern about creating digital crutches for the workers? In something like that then they rely too much on technology, and then when technology is not around, oops, production line stops. Oh, I can't do the inspection.
Yep.
Oh, I don't know how to do this because the chat is not available. I think that's...
But if the technology is around, the production line stopped anyway, because the production line itself is so reliant on if it's a power outage, there's no production line. If it's an IT outage, there's no production line.
Well,
we're not going to produce these things on a desert island somewhere where you would have to do the calculus without the benefit of a TI-85, right? You're always going to have the phone in your pocket. You're always going to have that in that environment, right? So that's the reason that we don't want them winging it. If they don't know,
of course,
right? We would rather that they ask, right?
Yeah.
We would rather that they know specifically what that value is.
Yeah. When you have the thing, stop, think, call for help,
right.
Even nowadays. But I think the issue of digital crutches is important, because you don't want people to stop thinking and just rely on the technology.
Right.
You have to be the first critic of whatever is the output that is coming to you. Yes, Cody?
That's a very interesting point, and I think that if Google Maps had AI integrated, it would ask me, why do you need to know how to get home again, right? And my wife can attest that I use that as a digital crutch 100%. She's like, we've gone to this restaurant 20 times in the last 6 months. Why do you not know how to get there?
Exactly.
So I think that's a very real concern. It's interesting.
Yeah. Think about telephone numbers. When I was growing up, I knew 50 telephone numbers. Right now, I'm lucky if I know my own. Yeah. Okay, next question.
Hi, my name is Laura Octorloni. I work with BSI, and I guess my question would be to the whole panel. around the kind of digital strategy for collecting all the data. So with all these calls being made, I'm sure there's a lot of information, different types of data that are being collected. What kind of is the strategy for making sure when you collect all this data that it's kind of standardized and useful throughout the organization as a whole?
Who wants to go first? Did you understand the question? Okay, so who wants to go first answering it?
Yeah, I'll go first. So, we launch technology, it costs a lot of money, and then, management wants to know if it's being utilized. So you've got to go to logs, see who's making the phone calls, see who's, answering, how often, and that will determine, maybe you need to market this product a little bit more. Are your users using it? If they're not, do we need to train them? Do we need, what do we need to do? Because your ROI is online there. You spend a lot of money on the technology. You want to make sure it's being used.
Yeah, I think it's a matter of maturing to that point where we're just at the point where we're starting to collect data, and now it's the analytics will kick in and start to reveal the trends in the data, which you can apply AI to do, by the way.
Randy, are you wanting to contribute?
Yeah, the data is one of those things that's it's kind of a double-edged sword. So for instance, we had an issue where we dig into the data and we found that if the user did not back out of the program in a specific way, then it did not close out the logging function on the time. So then we weren't actually able to find out who used it for how long consistently. So then we had big holes in our data as a result of that. So that's one of the things that you want to look at with whatever application you're going to use. Make sure that that logging function is very consistent. It doesn't have any holes in it like that.
Thank you. Is it switched on?
Now it is. Eddie Anderson, McDonald Miller Facility Solutions. How do you balance the ROI of deploying remote XR solutions to your staff that ultimately may or may not ever even need that remote support capability? And did you ever find yourself over-provisioned and concerned that you weren't receiving the value of that solution? What would you say to that, looking at kind of that dichotomy?
I can start. For us, again, quite a number of sites. We're starting with tablets and not necessarily glasses in all the cases. Some of the technical experts have glasses, but for the sites, they can connect via tablet to the technician because then they already have that tablet, right? Because we're looking for an immediacy of response and not really having that distributed glassware. So depending on the case, but being able to utilize tablets that are already there for work orders, management, for data logging, and utilizing tools that already exist. And that's helped to manage that cost perspective.
When we talk about remote assist, right, we look at the costs that you could save, right? Flying someone across the country just to see something where you could use a piece of technology to do that. Not having to get gowned up to go into the process area. I know it's minimal, but you scale that over dozens and dozens of users, and that's your savings. Employee satisfaction in the job that they're doing, right? Now their frustrations are at an all-time low because they have the tools to be more efficient inside of the area. So it's a little bit of a difficult question to start, quantifying your ROI. We look at surveys. We survey our employees to make sure that they're happy with the technology. If they're not, we iterate.
I think also it's important, the biggest thing is use case selection. So you don't want to buy $100,000 worth of product and software to fix something you're going to do once a year, right? But assuming you select the right use case where it's going to be used, I think it's really about the dedicated effort to capture the ROI. And that's not always done, but it takes a concerted effort, whether it's cost, schedule, performance. Those savings aren't always just, hey, it's very clear we saved 50K here. Sometimes it takes a real concerted effort to measure what it took before versus what it takes now in terms of cost, schedule, and performance to be able to show that you're getting that ROI. And I think in our use case, in our programs, it's been very easy to cross that return on investment threshold from our initial cost The more difficult part is having the manpower and dedicating the time to pull that data out to show materially this much cost, this much schedule, this much performance increase or decrease.
Okay, Ryan?
Yeah, I was just going to say, similar to Jeff, for our implementation of RealWare, we basically didn't have as quantifiable of ROI during the initial kind of business case for that technology because of the uncertainty around the use cases and just how it would pan out. But what we did is look at the opportunity size in terms of, we could look at in cases where mechanics are traveling across the country or across the world to help fix aircraft, how long were those aircraft down in those cases, and how many of those hours could be attributed to that travel time. And then what's the value of, the total of all that aircraft downtime? We never advertised that we would expect to get back all of that aircraft time, but some fraction we could expect to get back from implementing this technology. And, the cost of the implementation is what it costs to determine what fraction that's going to be. But if we do nothing, we know we're going to get this cost going forward.
Although I agree that sometimes measuring the cost is a challenge in itself. If you look at the cost of poor quality, you don't know when it happens, it's really painful, but until it happens, it's not on your radar. Yeah. Okay, we've exceeded our time. Thank you very much for attending this session, and I'd like also to thank our panelists, and I hope you enjoyed the rest of your time at AES. Thank you.